Welcome. I'm David McCraney. Thank you for joining our workshop. We want these workshops to help industry professionals like yourselves sharpen their tools. We were scheduled to do several of these throughout the year. We're looking forward to it. We'll cover different topics such as safety issues, cyber security issues for events, among other topics. The next workshop I'm really looking forward to, we're hosting in April, and it's going to be focused on the metaverse, NFTs, and esports. So stay tuned for the dates. So let's begin. Our first speaker is our very own creative director here at Everlast Productions. Please welcome Joe Rada.
Nailed it. Hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you so much for joining us today. Super excited to get started. I'm the creative director here at Everlast Productions. I've been here for about 7 years. My background is in scenic design. I have my BFA from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. I'm currently back in school for my MBA. And around that, I'm going to be talking to you a lot today about the analytics around why we brand events. And I think that's super important to understand. You know, brand has come a long way from its original origins to the concept that it is today. So we're going to talk about that. Speaking of, where did it originate? Brand actually comes from an ancient word in Scandinavian language, meaning to mark with wood. So they would burn the wood and then they would mark it. It was later adapted by Middle English to mean to burn with hot iron. So they would literally leave their mark with hot iron. Then it became a word that meant sword. So a piece of iron that was forged in fire that left your permanent mark on another being. From there, today, brand now means to essentially trademark an item. But that's not how we really use it. In the 1820s, with the rise of mass production came the need to mark goods and products that were being sold so that you could easily identify them during shipping. That kind of started the era that is brand. In 1870, it became possible for the first time to trademark your specific identity legally to stop competitors from associating themselves with you. This was important because it started to represent quality of a product. So now brand was no longer just a marking or a signifier, it was starting to represent the quality of a product. With the rise of mass media, specifically radio, audiences were starting to become larger and larger and larger around the world. In the 1920s, a gentleman named Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, coincidentally, actually published a book called Propaganda. In that book, he argued that by aligning your ideals as a company with the ideals of the mass public, you could change purchasing behaviors. And that is arguably the moment in time when the concept of brand started to become a thing. You saw companies shift from no longer caring about just what their look was, but what their identity was, making sure that they had a full cohesive personality to what they were selling. Jump forward to the 1980s, cross-Atlantic exports were happening like crazy. The Pacific Ocean exports were starting to become a realistic thing. And you were seeing companies for the first time move towards strategies of brand recognition. It wasn't enough to be held accountable for your quality, but for people to walk down the street and know who you were just by seeing your colors, by seeing your mark. They saw great increases in purchasing with that. So essentially, brand is to give meaning to a product. And that product can be a physical item that you can hold. It can be a service. It could be an organization, or in our cases, it could be an event. So that's what we're going to mostly talk about today. But why? Why do we do this? Is it important? Does it matter? Do people actually care about this? 60% of millennials expect a consistent brand identity across all platforms. Why does that matter? Millennials are currently the largest group of individuals in the history of the world at 72.1 million bodies. Not only are they the largest group of individuals, but they're currently having the most families. That means they have children between the ages of 0 to 18 with a 2.5 average of number of children. That makes them the largest purchasing power in the entire world. Brands care about that. Why? Because by having a consistent look and feel across all of your channels, you can increase your annual revenue by 23%. That's crazy. So if you have $1 million company, you have an additional $230,000 of revenue just from having a consistent identity across your channels. For events, millennials care 43% more about being able to engage with a brand and their ideals in person than they did 2 years ago. So being sure that your messaging is on point and that all of your brand ambassadors, all of your content is aligning to your one goal is going to increase that interest by 43%, which is going to affect 60% of your audience, which is going to give you 23% more in revenue. That is super important. So how do we do this? What are the core elements to think about when you are establishing a brand? Visual identifiers are logo, color, font, and graphics, event theme and tagline, and naming conventions. For today's exercise, we're going to be looking at what we did for this event as examples. You want your logo to be easily identifiable. You want it to be super clean. You want to make sure that people can read it from a distance. It doesn't have to necessarily be text. In our case, it is. It could be an image. It could be an icon, or it could be a name. But the key is to make sure it's something that is unique and not that it's something that is going to blend with the common market. Guidelines. This is arguably the most important element when it comes to identifying a brand. A lot of people think that it's not necessary or it's not needed or we're close enough, but this is the backbone of your entire identity. There's a lot more that goes into this sometimes, logo application, scaling, textures, patterns, but for today, these are the core elements that we're going to talk about. First and foremost is color. This tends to be the hardest thing for most people to wrap their heads around. Why does color matter and why does consistent color matter? Just because it looks one way on your screen does not mean it's going to come out the same way in print because there's a million different factors that are going to affect that. The calibration of the printers, the substrate that you're printing on, all of these things make a difference. I hear all the time, but I sent you my PMS color. That's a Pantone color for those that don't know PMS, Pantone matching system. That's great, but it's useless in production. Not to steal the thunder from some of the other presenters, they're going to get a little more into that. But a PMS is not sufficient when you're identifying your brand colors. You need to list out what your CMYKs are, what your RGBs are, what your hex codes are. These are all the elements that go into actual production on site and into digital platforms for your brand recognition. Typography. It's not enough to just tell us what your font is. How do you want your font used? What is okay to use for headers? What font sizes do you like? What scaling do you like? What's your aspect ratios of your font? You can see on our brand guidelines, we have the note that says all caps, no lowercase. That makes a huge difference to who you are and the messaging that you're putting across. We want to be loud. We want to be impactful. The second you go into lowercase, you're a little bit more subdued, right? So uppercase everything, lowercase nothing. Supporting graphics. If you leave it up to your graphic designers to just come up with something that looks cool, you don't know what you're going to get. Be very clear about what is okay for your supporting graphics. Here we have our blue line, our pink strip, and our purple gradient circles. That is it, nothing else. Taglines, your event theme or your messaging. This is a great way to tell your audiences what to expect from your event. They can be something clever and fun. They can be something that's short and sweet. They can be something that's a little longer and a little bit more detailed. When you're working in B2B spaces, it's probably going to be something that's aligned with your sales strategies. When you're working in B2C spaces, it's probably going to be something that's a little bit more exciting and thought-provoking to get your audience engaged. If you're working with internal sales teams, it might be something that's more motivational-based. But choosing a strong tagline or theme and representing it with a strong graphic along with your logo is really going to drive interest in your event. And then naming conventions. A lot of people don't really put much thought into this, but are they sessions? Are they breakouts? Are they seminars? What you decide to brand your sessions makes a huge difference because it's going to appeal to your target demographic, right? A learning session is going to mean a lot more to a research group than saying it is going to be a talkback. Most researchers don't want to hear a talkback. They want to learn. They're there for knowledge. So how you decide to brand these is important. Also, the style in which you brand them. You can see here we've gone a little bit more playful with ours. You know, put it in print, make it bold. Digital, digital, digital. Balancing the budget, playing with this, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word. I love doing this all the time. Thank you, alliteration, right? Is going to keep it a little edgier, a little more fun. That's what we want from our target audience. Does any of this actually matter? Of course it does. You know why? Because color alone improves brand recognition by 80%. 80% just by having a consistent color across all of your platforms. We talked about this already, but 23%, I just want to stress this, in revenue, just from being consistent, making sure your logo isn't stretched out, making sure your logo isn't showing up in neon pink when your colors are green. This is so important. And so what platforms are we talking about when we say consistent across all platforms? You have your physical, but then you have your digital. On the digital side, especially for events, you're going to have your event website. You're going to have your registration and your ticketing. You're going to have your event app, and you're going to have your event emails. It's easy to find a third-party vendor to take care of this for you, but choosing a partner that you're able to work with and build an identity around is super important when you're talking about any of these functions. And of course, social media. Social media is huge today, and you want to make sure that you're being represented accordingly. 38% of users will stop engaging with the website the second they deem it unattractive. You have approximately 3.7 seconds to capture someone's attention when they land on your website. If it takes too long to load, they will leave it. You have lost revenue. If you don't have enough pertinent information on your website, they will leave it. You have lost revenue. If your website is ugly or fugly, they will leave it and you have lost revenue. Your landing page, by having a longer landing page, will lead to 220% more leads. People crave content, people crave knowledge, and when it comes to events, they are there to learn something or to engage with you. So by keeping it short and sweet, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You think people might not have interest, but they want to know what they're getting into before they get into it. And then email marketing. People think of it as spam mail, but email marketing actually shows an annual ROI increase of 122%. That's 4 times more than social media, direct mail, and paid searches combined, which is insane. So by putting together a strong email campaign surrounding your event is crucial. Looking at the analytics behind those. What are people engaging with? What is interesting them? What are you finding people are not even opening and sending straight to their spam folders? All of that can be tracked. It makes a huge difference when you're setting up for an event. And then the type of event. This is something you definitely need to think about when thinking about your branding because it makes a huge difference. Are you marketing to B2B? That's business to business. B2C, business to customer. Internal leadership, internal sales, conferences. Is it a virtual event? Because virtual, while it may seem like it's its own beast, is actually very similar to an in-person event in terms of its strategy. Know your audience. Think about your demographic. Who are they? How old are they? Where do they come from? What is the primary gender of your audience? What are their interests? What do they like to do on the weekends? What are their hobbies? What is their lifestyle? Are they workaholics? Are they casual? Do they enjoy wine, come 4 o'clock in the afternoon? These are all things that are going to cater to your market, especially when establishing your look and feel. Their financial standing, right? Making sure that your brand and your look and feel is on par with their financial standing. Do you need to look luxury? Do you need to look relatable? Do you need to look homely? That all makes a difference. What their employment is, what industries they work in, and of course their education and their background. On-site. Most of us are very familiar with on-site and what goes into on-site. But some of the things we don't think about when we're thinking through branding is decor and furnishings. What does your furniture selection say about you as an organization? Do you want it to be playful? Do you want it to be stiff? Do you want it to be rigid? Do you want it to be sleek and modern? The decor makes a big difference. Swag, promotional products, what are you giving away? Not only the branding you're putting on those products, but the products themselves. If you are a sustainably based company and you're giving away, metal water bottles, that's cool, but the manufacturing process that goes into metal burns off more renewable resources and creates more petroleum in the atmosphere and in the world than is worth that it saves in water. So is that really the best choice? Do you look for something that is bamboo-based, comes from a renewable resource in and of itself, is recyclable? Think about those things when you're choosing your swag items. Booth and lounge designs, right? It's super easy to call up an expo company, say, I have to do a booth. Great, give me your SEG white walls. We'll put some logos on them. But what does that say about your originality? What does it say about your identity? Think about that. And then signage, all of it. Every piece of signage that you're putting up in your entire event matters, whether it's wayfinding, whether it is restroom signs, whether it's your registration and check-in. Think about every piece of that signage. And with that, wraps it up for me. we're going to go right into talking about in-person signage. I'm going to introduce Luis Rivero. He is the local owner of Speed Pro Imaging here and one of our great printing partners. Luis, thank you.
Thank you. I don't think it's on. Is it on?
They'll take care of it.
They'll take care of it, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, here comes the boring part. Thank you, Joe. Thank everybody for coming. My name is Luis Rivero. I'm the owner of Speed Pro Imaging for Lauderdale, and we specialize in large format printing. Whether it's directional or branding, in my opinion, this is the most cost-effective way to express messaging to your guests or your attendees to your event. However, it's not as simple as making a file or sending it to the printer. It is important to understand the process and make sure that you are, one, getting what you need, and two, knowledgeable when you're speaking to your printing partner. That is that will make it more of a success, your event. Large format printing, it's a also they call it wide format. Large format printing. They also call it wide format printing. It's it could go as large as 15 to 20 feet. 8 feet is usually the most common format used, and it's also it also comes in 10 feet. I'm sorry, I'm terrible in public speaking, as you'll notice. And the bigger the print is, obviously, the more expensive it is, because the material is more expensive, and also the machine that you're using is also more expensive. In my studio, we have a 10 feet printer, and also we have a couple of smaller ones. Anyway, a couple of printers. Here you can see two types of printer. One is an inkjet printer, and the other one is a flatbed. I'm just going to tell you about what we have in our studio. In our studio, we have inkjet. It's actually called a latex printer, which prints the first one, which prints on a roll. As the word says, it's you take the roll, you put it on the printer, and then it kind of prints as a printer in your house. Obviously, with much better quality, and the look is amazing. The flatbed printer, it's a printer that we use mostly for substrates which are more rigid. On the flatbed, one of the qualities of the flatbed is that you can print on ceramic. You can print on wood. You can also print on PVC. So it is, you also get an amazing look. And on the flatbed, we use the UV ink, which makes it even stronger and better in quality. This is 4-color process printing. 4-color process printing is what you call the process of printing. It's called 4-color because it comes in 4 colors. One is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's also called CMYK. In our studio, we have 6-color printing because besides CMYK, we also have light magenta and light cyan. There is another printer that we also have in our studio that prints on white ink, which is a little different style or a different type of printer, which is, it looks beautiful, by the way, on the way it prints. Here is a sample of what CMYK means, or what CMYK looks like. If you're looking at this on your screen, it actually looks brighter here. When you print it, it's a little duller. It's a little more subdued in terms of color. I wanted to ask you a question, if anybody knows what 4/0 means. Joe, you probably know. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know you know the answer. 4 means printing in one side in 4 colors, which is CMYK. Sometimes in our studio, we call that one-sided printer. 4/4. I'm sure you all know the answer to that one, which is print in both sides. And we also call it double-sided printer. 1/0. This is a different, and this is what I used to get in school, zeros. This is called in one side black and white. On the other side, nothing, stay. The same thing, 4/1, print 4 colors in one side and black and white on the back. Color codes, like Joe stole my thunder. This is very, very important how you relate to that, because this is how your print is going to look like. We like to work on our studio with CMYK colors. And this is the way it should be presented. The numbers like this. 78 for cyan, 80 for magenta, 12 for yellow, and 3 for black. This is what represents this color for this specific event. So this is very important that when you send that information to your printer, that you send the correct information. One of the things I always like to do with my customers, if they really, really, really want the color to be the way they want it, to request or to offer. I usually offer, but if you're a customer, I prefer you request a color sample so you can compare it to what you want and what you need. Because even though you send the correct colors, it might look different because of the material, whether it's vinyl, whether it's vinyl is the different type of vinyls, different type of whites, or if you print on PVC, it might look different on PVC. So this is something that I always tell people, ask for that to your printer. If they don't do it, then it's time to look for another printer that does that. Pantones. Pantones is a reference. I think Joe mentioned this. For us in our business, Pantones, it really doesn't mean anything. We don't need it. It's useless. It's actually more of a pain because when somebody comes with a Pantone, listen, I want to print this on this color. What that creates to us is a little problem because what we have to do manually, try to match that Pantone color to our printer. And it does take a little time to do that. I should charge for that. I don't charge for that, but don't tell anybody. But that's the way. That's the way Pantone is. It's an indicator more than anything else. Spot printing. Spot printing is if you want your PMS to be exact, this can definitely be done, but it requires ordering custom inks. This process is called spot printing. This means that specific color is being printed in a very specific spot. This can be very expensive, and for a printer, for us, we like to have a good amount of lead time for us to be able to spot print something for you. Materials. There are, I guess, 3 basic type of materials. You have banner, vinyl, and board. Let's start with banner. Okay, banner, you have screen, smooth, and perf. Screen, it's a material that has like a little texture to it. I don't want to say texture, but it has like a little layers, very little. It's the one most commonly used, I guess, because it's the less expensive one. You could see on school screen banners. You could see on events, and the print it's fine, but it's not as sharp as the next one, which is smooth banner. The word actually explains everything. Smooth. It's very smooth, and when you print it, it looks much better than on a screen banner. And then you have perforated or blow through. That is basically what the word says. The wind goes through that. Again, that's what sometimes you see on fences from constructions, from schools, from events, advertising. And the print might be a little duller because it has that little holes, but it's very good if you want to have it outside. Vinyl. You have temporary, permanent, and perforated. Temporary, it's temporary. It's the one that you want to use on an event that is maybe 1 or 2 days that you want to peel off. We use it for dance floors. Tonight there's a dance, and then we need to remove it the next day. So it comes out fairly easily. One of the things you need to know about temporary adhesive is that if it stays there longer, usually anywhere after 30 days, it becomes permanent. And then you have permanent adhesive vinyl. The word says itself is permanent. That's something that, let's say, if you want a wall mural, or if you want to do something in a store that you want that to stay there, that's a good type of adhesive. And then you have perf. We use that a lot in schools, window perf, because they want to be able to see through. It has little holes. It comes in 3 different types, which is 60-40, 80-20, and 75-25. And I think also it comes in 30-70, but I'm not quite sure. And that basically represents the size of the hole on the window perf. And then you have boards, your substrates. You have foam core, ultra board, PVC. Foam core, it's the, and there is another one here that we use a lot for street signs or coroplast, which is also the ones that most real estate offices use that, for sale signs. The PVC and polystyrene. First time, I never know how to pronounce that word, polystyrene. First time I pronounce it. Thank you for that. Anyway, those are the boards. Now, creative application. This is something that is very cost-effective, and it looks beautiful. The one on the left is a sticker truss surrounded with PVC and then vinyl wrap. It looks amazing. It looks good. It's a little challenging on installation-wise, but it is amazing. The one on the right, it's a PVC sign, aluminum vinyl mounted and cut white PVC letters, glue to the face, printed blue PVC details, and Everlast. By the way, these are we did this for Everlast. These are Everlast signs, and the holes were filled with marquee lights by Everlast. The lights were down here in Everlast. And this is another beautiful project that we did with Everlast. We actually used one of our flatbeds, and we printed on Everlast gave us the wood, and we printed on a flatbed. It looks great. It looked great. I like to mention that the printing process is that we use UV inks. This means our printer gets hit with ultraviolet lights as a part of the printing process. This helps with the pigmentation to instantly dry, and you can take it out and then start using it right away after you take it out of our studio, or right after it's printed. Here, there are two more applications that we did for Everlast. The one on the right, it's PVC work. I'm sorry, on the left, it's a Pandora sign. On the one on top, it says Pandora, cut out with black PVC and glue to an acrylic frame that gives that floating effect. And then we have a bunch of CNC shapes that were layered and installed also on that wall. On the right, you have the oversized Bacardi letters cut out to PVC with acrylic bridges for support. This one right here, you would think, I guess your first impulse would be to vinyl wrap this area. But what we did here is that we use a smooth banner print framed out with wood trim, and then right on the front, beautiful LED neon light mounted on the side. I love those LED lights, by the way. And then lastly, this is the part that it's as important as the first part. Well, I guess as important as everything, but this is how we like to get the files. You have here file types and resolution size. Let's talk about file types. You have two types of files. You have vector and rasterized file. Vector files, images built by a mathematical formula that places points on grids. These files are infinitely scalable. Means that you can scale it as long as you want. I mean, as big as you want, and they will look always nice. And this file, the formats on this are AI, EPS, and PDF files. Depending on your, I guess on my designer, on my printer guide, some people like to get in AI, EPS, but most of my people like to get it on PDF, on made by the Illustrator. And you have your rasterized files, which are pixel-based images. These files are limited in their scalability, or basically how you scale them. Think of the fitted bed sheet. While you can stretch it, there are limitations to how far it can go. Otherwise, it will get pixelated. And then you have resolution. We usually use PPI, which are pixels per inch. Depending how big is the, or how bigger is the number, the more pixels you have on the picture. So that is something that all depends on the printer you're working with, how they want the files. These are basically some of the things that I hope can help you on your next event. Mr. Rada. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Luis. Appreciate it. On that note, I just want to also mention that playing with your substrates and your materials is a great opportunity to experiment. Like all those PV signs, a lot of people would want to go to a sign shop, have them made out of actual metals or fabricated from wood. That's not always necessary. A good sign partner or a good printing partner can fabricate those in about half the time and probably for half the cost. So just by being creative with the materials that you're using and how you're leveraging them, you can really excel with your events. Next up, we're going to talk about a little bit of digital with our very own Rick Solari.
Hey, Joe. Thank you. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? Loosen up. Come on, let's flex a little bit. My name is Rick Solari. I'm one of the video engineers here, but I also specialize in digital technology and content creation. I've been fortunate to work on some projects that have allowed me to create digital content for. My hope today is that you're able to at least take away some items that I go through to make your next digital impact. We spoke about how important brand design is from Joe, and we spoke about how great it is about print with Louis. Thank you. Now I'm going to take you through the digital and the versatility of digital signage. So, digital, there's an abundance of technologies that we can choose from conveying a message. Some of the things I'm going to navigate and are going to best plan for your best impact. We'll discuss various technologies, how to use them, and how to plan for each one of those. All right, so what is digital signage, right? When we first hear about digital signage, we think the obvious. It's often connected to the screens themselves. We display content, information on any space, right? Well, we at Everlast see it as more. We see it as game changers for engaging audiences. There's a sea of possibilities that we see, not just for retailers, but for businesses big and small. So, not just a flash of light, right? Well, on the technical side of things, we have digital signage means a centrally controlled content distribution platform that can be used to broadcast many different messages. Say that 5 times fast. We're used to seeing them in airports and restaurants. Even though we don't notice them as marketing tools, they are immensely popular. Why? Well, because dynamic content engages an audience better than a regular static message. Up to date, it conveys relevant content, it has moving images that are attention grabbers, and the versatility and readability of changing graphics make sure your message is always on point. So, screens. Okay, how do we plan for them? Where do we start? I'm going to walk us through on how I start a project and give you tips along the way. So the planning phase. Joe briefly and also Louis made mention of branding guidelines. Branding guidelines are very important in that digital phase. That RGB value is what we use to kind of incorporate our designs on 4 screens. Now, the first 3 questions that I ask after receiving those branding guidelines, which is a tremendous help, is the first. What type of screen? Is this a TV monitor? Is this an LED wall? Is it projectors? Even mobile devices. Yes, we know them to be quite effective screens, right? We're always on them. So the next thing, this kind of tells me a lot about the audience, the environment, and the level of engagement. The next question is, what size? All right, does size matter? Well, it does when you're talking about LED. There's a big difference between HD and 4K, and even the custom sizes that we see on a regular basis. So when I ask this question, it gives me a space to start. It tells me how far I can go without compromising the content or the brand. The next thing it kind of helps with the size is what's the orientation. So this also helps me along with the size, so it gives me a perspective of what I'm looking at. Now, in this image behind me, you see that we have quite a lot of examples on answering these questions. In this project behind me we did for Facebook, the project has a majority of LED screens. We also incorporated mobile screens, but this project had different size screens and different orientations. Here you can see the differences on the top image and the bottom image. We used the same space and the same technologies and created 2 completely different events. Now you can also notice that branding guidelines played a huge part in this to create the artwork, the text, the logos, and we made sure that it was impactful throughout not only this main signage, but the presentations themselves. So, stand close to the screen. Let's dive a bit deeper into the types of screens you can leverage. And we're going to walk through some pros and cons. Of course, they're debatable. As mentioned, we had TV screens, LED walls, projection, and mobile. TV screens. Well, they're great for vivid colors, they stay true to creative design, and they're fairly easy to place in virtually any space. The cons, well, they can tend to produce some glares from various light sources. From time to time on different standard sizes, they can limit the amount of audience that views at any given time. You can see in this picture, this was an NFT gallery that we did about more than 30 TV screens. They were all different sizes, all different orientations, and the majority, if you notice, of the lighting has been turned off so that the gallery can be showcased. All right, so LED screens. Huge impact on display content. They can be virtually any size and fit any audience. Some cons, well, they're heavy. Their weight and size is a big factor on making sure that it fits your space. Now, in this picture, you see that this is a project we did with the Miami Heat. We produced and filmed their season opener for the games, which continues to play every beginning of the game. We used 2 LED walls, one with the content you see here and another one that we lowered down in front to give a different effect. This kind of created kind of a bleed through that had an amazing effect for each player as we shot them throughout. All right, projection screens. This is my fave. I've always loved projection. I do quite a lot of projection. So they're overall great for virtually all content. They're true to color, and they can provide flexibility in size. The cons, well, they lose a little bit of visibility in brightly lit environments. So you want to make sure you plan for what environment this projection is going to go through. If you see in here in this picture, this was a project we did for Toe Jam Backlot in Wynwood. We used projection to light up an old school bus that had already existing artwork, and we were able to change that said content throughout the entire night. This is also good to emphasize your brand. Mobile devices. So we know that we can access content from anywhere. This isn't obvious. We know that we can stay true to the brand, the design, and the size. The cons, well, we use them quite a lot, so battery life goes to quite quickly. And then when you're in a big venue space, sometimes connectivity issues. But all in all, this is actually a great medium to also think about on a regular basis when you're planning out for signage. From this image, you can see this is also the Facebook project I mentioned earlier. We designed and implemented an augmented reality design. So what happened was when you scanned the actual badge of the event, this artwork would come to life, and you could actually move and manipulate it around. This is another way to showcase the brand and the artwork associated with it. All right, so these are some more examples that we incorporated, that we used different types of mediums. So in this project we did in Washington, D.C., we created an actual scenic piece of a White House in Washington, D.C., and we did projection mapping on it, and it allowed us to place content on virtually any bit of that surface. Another great example we did this is a project that we used LED for Bacardi. Has multiple size screens, and to those attending, it looked like one continuous long screen with multiple windows of content. This also allowed for them to change a different look throughout the entire week and session, for that matter. All right, so video. This is obviously my love as well, so I'm a little bit partial to this side of things. Making an impact with motion. So I saw in Joe's slide that he gave kind of a descriptive word about brand and kind of broke it up. So I wanted to do the same with video. It's not as detailed, obviously, but video, or from the Latin verb vide, it means to see. Also from the Old French, it means presence, sight, appearance, and even dream. And from Old English, it means to know. Today, it's a little bit more of a technical term, broadcasting or recording or moving visual images made digitally. I also took a little bit more on the stats of why video. Well, We know that 65% of executives visit a website and interact with a brand just by after seeing a video. We also know that YouTube consumption doubles every single year. We already know the success of TikTok and Instagram. And finally, we also know that videos and emails increase a 300 click-through rates. That's huge numbers. So what can we do to make it visible, and how do we make it impact, right? There are 4 last things I want to leave with everybody. And this is something I incorporate when making a great video. The 4 E's of video that I try to live by, if you will. The first is engaging. There's a reason that oftentimes the best communicators are the best storytellers. People are drawn to a good story. The better you're at telling that story with video content, the better the video will be received. The next one is emotional. Facts tell, but stories sell. We should be using videos to make people laugh, inspire your audience, or to simulate some emotional response that are likely to make your message more memorable and more impactful. Last, or I should say thirdly, is educational. Our brains process visual information 60,000 times faster than text. No matter how you slice it, video is the best way to educate your audience and leave lasting impressions. And lastly is empathetic. You want to help your audience with your video. You also want to show that you truly care about the problem that you're having and how to help solve it. And that kind of concludes my side of things. I want to thank you guys for kind of sticking through. If you have more questions, we're going to have some questions at the very end. I'm going to bring back Joe here. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, guys. With that, I think it's also important to think about how to break the mold with video, right? We're used to seeing things in the 9:16 aspect ratio. How can you leverage them to be a little bit more dynamic and a little different than what the typical audience is used to seeing? So just keep that in the back of the brain. I would love to welcome to the stage Lisa Bowser. She's the owner of Light Bright Tribe, a good friend of mine. We've worked together for quite some time. Lisa, come on up.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Let's see. I'm Lisa Bowser. I'm owner of Bright Light. We're a custom LED neon company here in South Florida. And prior to opening our company, which we launched 5 years ago, I produced corporate events as well. So that's kind of a little bit about my background, and I'm working with Everlast for, the past decade on different projects and things. So I wanted to take you through some innovative ways that you can amplify your brand with our signage, with LED neon. It really makes a great impact for your brand and for your event. So when I first came across this technology, it's super durable. And there's lots of different ways that you can use it for your events. For a photo op, this is, taking, to show you some examples. The Marlins, we did a 360 of a container, and it was a built-in immersion experience for them. So you'll see that 305 image there. So all of the LED neon, it's all PVC based. And design-wise, we can do a lot of different things. So this other one is also mixing with an artist. You'll see that Together Shine Brighter. And so that's putting neon, the LED, on top of the painting itself, the mural. This is another neon tide we did with Everlast for one of their Bacardi events. But this, so it's creating the photo app itself. So, the signage functions as a marketing tool. And then you can have reshareable images for your clients, for their customers, and then it goes down that line. And you can use it for, floral walls. You can see some of the examples I brought in on the table in the back. So you can see the different colors. We can mix printing with it. We do tabletop as well. So for branding-wise, you can also translate logos. So this is another project we did with Viacom with Everlast. It was about a 20-foot slat wall with all of the logos built in. So it was a step and repeat, in a sense, wall, but it was all in LED neon. So we can take your files and translate those into that signage that you can use. And the great thing with the signage too, for events, and then you can repurpose it in your client's offices, or then reuse it again in a different way. So it does have multiple uses, and it lasts for that investment. And you'll see also we can mix printing as well. And so there's different kinds of applications. Like I said, we can do tabletop. We have battery packs as well. All of our signs are dimmable. So for those different photo op moments, they're on remotes, and they can also do flashing as well. We have different kinds of acrylics. So there's lots of ways to bring it back to the brand for your client and customers to create that within the signage. So other applications too, from the ceiling, you can hang. This is for a Google for a trade show, behind staging as well. Also, for other photo ops. This is for corporate and then consumer as well. So there are really no limits also with sizing for us. Same thing, we can go quite large as well. This is from a Nike marathon for Ohio State. They took using for directional arrows that we did on large grid walls. So they incorporated that. It was a nighttime event. So using the signage with that in, you can use it for directional. So bringing the design element in as well. This was a takeover for Art Basel for Bodega, and everything is for indoor use, but specifically for events, you can use it outside for short-term purposes. But same also using for signage to mark your event with, for interiors, exteriors as well. This is for MTV for a ski event so it was a large tent on the exterior. And then for activations, for different takeovers, same kind of idea, using for different branding and marking with the signage. So we can take existing logos or messaging and to mix that in for Coachella, for Key sunglasses, Benefit. This is an example of a takeover of a diner where they tricked out the whole thing for a promotion for a couple of days, having influencers come in, same kind of idea, then they're resharing, and then your branding will keep going that way for that marketing moment. Oleopop, same also with trade shows as well. And for different photo ops as well, you see, like I said, also we can mix printing with our neon, so we can mix that together sometimes with sizing. If something's too small or a little odd, that it might not look as great in that, we can also print onto acrylic and then mix it together with that. And you'll see that in this Chase Let's Get Away activation. It's a Poshmark event for their consumers. So those, you can see that as well. And Klarna. And activations for hanging from the ceiling. There's lots of different things that you can do for that as well. But you can take a look at some of the examples, and if you have any questions. But for staging, this is for Oscar event. But we can customize most anything in using different kinds of acrylics and different colors to match for your brands and for pop-ups, just to give you some different examples. We can also do handwriting and translate that also to neon too. And then also for social, if there's social events with monogramming and marks as well, or last names, which is very popular right now as well. But it's just to kind of give you an overview and how neon can really, make an impact on your event. And going back to what Joe was talking about with your branding and making that translate all throughout, it can add it as a great accent to that. But thank you so much for having me today, and I wanted to introduce Lauren from, and Joe's coming back.
Yep. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks.
So LED neons are a great way to leverage a mixture of technology and print, right? Know your demographic when you're using LED neons. There is not a 20 to 30-year-old female who is not going to want to stop and take a picture with that neon sign. Similar to oversized letters, there is not a woman between the age of 32 and 52 who is not going to stop and take a picture with oversized letters. It doesn't matter what they say. So think about that when you're choosing your branding. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about budgeting. So I've learned more recently than not that there's two types of brains. There's quantitative and qualitative. And unfortunately, they happen to be the same side of a coin. And so while I have a qualitative brain and I live in imaginary land most of the time, our very own Lauren Kipnis definitely has a quantitative brain and likes to bring me back to reality.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Kipnis, and I am the Director of Client Services here at Everlast. I lead the team that provides event management support to our clients. We manage everything from your general session content to show flow to branding, venue, food and beverage, and overall event budget. You've heard a lot about design, large format, neon, digital, but the number one question we hear is, what does it cost? Which is quickly followed up by, how much do I really need to spend? Let's take a look at your common event expenses. None of you are strangers to these. We've all seen these before. You have venue, audiovisual, staffing, travel, speakers, unique experiences, swag, emergency fund, and signage and branding. But let's see how that's broken out. About 43% of your master budget is spent on your venue and food and beverage. And then about 24% is for audiovisual. Sometimes this number is a little bit higher depending on the vertical of your business and what your goal is for your event. The rest of your budget is then divided between staffing, travel expenses, speakers, unique experiences, swag, hopefully your emergency fund, and of course branding. But no event is the same, so these percentages can vary. Cool, but that didn't really help, did it? The branding budget is one of those subjective areas where the amount you spend is determined by your event goals. We start by answering these three important questions. Number one, what is the main objective of this event? Is it a client-facing event launching a new product? Or is it an internal sales meeting? If your purpose is to increase brand awareness, your budget will need to be large enough to fulfill that purpose. Number two, who is your audience? Are they your clients, your employees, or your fans? You're more likely going to invest more money into your branding budget if the event is launching a new product to a group of your best clients. And number three, what is the experience you're trying to create? Branding is engagement. For an internal meeting, engagement promotes company culture and alignment. And for a client-facing meeting, engagement fosters emotional attachment and brand loyalty. Define how you want to engage with your audience. The answer to these questions help you define your strategy. Next, we walk the space to identify the branding opportunities. Walk like an attendee. Start at the entrance and walk the very same route your attendees will take. What are we looking for? We're looking for, what is the attendee's line of sight? What do they see when they first enter the event space? First impressions are everything, so this area is very important. Are there places to hang banners or signage? If a space is too tight, it makes sense to keep things off the ground, giving more space for attendees to move around. Are there windows? Window vinyls are an impactful yet inexpensive way to drive your message. What locations need directional signage? As you walk through, take a note of your path. Is it easy to find the meeting rooms? Where are the bathrooms? Which locations can you accommodate digital signage? Find places that have existing power to avoid the need for power drops. Now that we've walked the space, we make the list. We list out all the opportunities that came to mind during our walkthrough and then put them into two categories. You have the must-haves, which are the things that are necessary to run and organize events, which is name badges, welcome signage, directional signage. Then you have the nice-to-haves. Elevated ideas that tend to take us outside of our budget. Photo opportunities, those oversized letters Joe was talking about a second ago, and printed agendas. But definitely quote them all. Most vendors discount their pricing based on volume. But speaking being out of budget, who here has an in-house creative team? We do, and we love them. We love their crazy ideas. I love when the creative team wants to bring in a bulldozer into a ballroom because it looks cool and is on brand. And I'm pretty sure I heard Joe throw out an idea last week involving a shark. Though those ideas sound super cool, most times the budgets don't think so. So what do? We leverage those crazy creatives. We work together on a strategy to drive the messaging. The content they create for your branding is just as important as the format you use to display it. They are the experts when it comes to bringing ideas to life through visuals. However, proceed with caution, because if your team is anything like mine, make sure you set your boundaries up front. But what if there isn't a large budget for branding? No problem. There are ways to brand on a budget. Looking to print oversized signage? Look at using banner rather than vinyl. You will not only save on materials, but also installation cost. And for directional signage, use foam core instead of PVC. Use TV monitors or projectors to display logos and brand collateral. Digital is the best way to showcase your brand and monetize on sponsorships. It's versatile and dynamic. Now to picking your partners. Not all printing partners are created equal. Just the other day, Joe and I were on a site visit, and we were walking an event space that was branded for a conference. We noticed that there was vinyl installed using very visible Scotch tape. That is definitely not the finish you want. When choosing your printing partners, make sure you check them out thoroughly. Louis knows this very well. The more questions you ask, the better. First, ask for past experience. What experience do they have overall? What have they done in your event space? Ask for photos, case studies, and see photos from more than one event. What you're looking for is consistency. Your vendor is going to send you their best work, but it's your job to make sure that the vendor you pick, that's always their best work, or you'll end up with Scotch tape. What is their process? Ask the required lead time. How do they need you to send them their files? And then the most important, at least for me, the ability to print last minute. Are they able to print last minute? What if something's printed incorrectly? Are they able to reprint and install on time? Your venue's vendor may not be your ideal partner. Just think about that Scotch tape. And finally, how do we know if we're covered? When working through quotes, I ask these questions. Am I being charged fairly? Do your research. If you're using vinyl, research the average price for the vinyl in the market you're in. If someone's trying to charge you $40 per square foot for vinyl, you should probably get another quote. Are you being charged for the right materials? The material you pick says a lot about your brand. If you have sustainability initiatives, you're going to want to print on recycled cardboard rather than PVC. Are installation and removal included? Do not forget the removal. That can be a serious pain. Is everything needed for installation included? Ladders, lifts, enough installers. Getting these costs after the fact can truly impact your budget. And how much time do they have for install? Share your start times, how much time they have to load in, so that they know that there's a real deadline that people are coming. I know this was a lot of information in a really short time, but I hope you leave here today having learned something new to apply to your next event budget. And I'm going to turn it back over to Joe. Here you go. I'm going to just stay.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for covering all the boring stuff. No, but seriously, budget matters, right? It's very easy for me to go down the rabbit hole, especially with my team when we're together, of ideas. Ideas are free, but putting those ideas into practice is what costs money. And having someone like Lauren on the team is super important to the overall process, especially when you have a master budget to control. With that, I'm going to invite Lauren and Rick back up to the stage. We're going to see if there's any questions. If not, no hard feelings. But we're here for you. Anything?
Yeah. Great, there's stacks.
Okay.
But it might be for Louis. All right, so let's say I want to print, I'd like to print something.
Okay.
And I see something that's a really cool color on a pillow. I don't know what the CYK or PMS number or anything like that. I just know that I really like this cool pillow and I want my print to have that same turquoise.
Sure.
How do you determine what that color is?
So what we would typically do is, this is where you work with your creative team to put together a mood board, right? If you take a picture of that pillow, we can use that picture, we can identify some similar colors, and then give you a palette to choose from. So pretty straightforward and pretty easy.
And then I have...
Our printer if you want, you can print. If you send it to us, then we'll print it. And like I said, the printer has it prints like maybe 6 or 7 shades of that color, and then that way you can actually pick the one you want. I'm sorry, Joe.
No worries. Oh, I think we have a roaming mic.
What is the lead time on creative for an event?
So that can vary. We have had requests for tomorrow. We have had requests for today. The ideal lead time, depending on the scope of the event, would be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. That gives us a proper amount of time to work with you and your internal teams about concept and messaging, develop some various look and feels for you to choose from, and then really get into the nitty-gritty of the actual specifics you need, whether that be photo ops, background, step and repeats, lower thirds, title slides, presentation design. That all takes a lot of time. We all have different expertise on the team, but we all need to go through the proper exercises to make sure we're mastering the effect that you're looking for. Anyone else? Again, no pressure. Cool, awesome. So I'm gonna say that that's an end to our Q&A session. One thing I do wanna call out, if you notice, there was a lot of overlap in our decks, and that was intentional. Because branding doesn't live in specific pockets. Design does not exist without budget. Budget does not exist without technology. Technology does not exist without print. They all come together, and they all have very similar approaches, so you have to keep that in mind when you're talking through the identity and branding of your event. Great. Thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate having you, and we hope you check out our next one with FMU. Thanks.
Good work.